Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie recounts his marital struggles after suspecting his wife of infidelity with her male co-star in a play. Despite her denial, evidence from her phone confirms the affair. Confronted, she pleads for forgiveness, claiming it was just infatuation. He, feeling betrayed, ends the marriage, gets a restraining order, and ultimately divorces her. Now let's get into the stories. My wife and I lived in California for the entirety of our relationship. We met when we were in college, both 19 years old. She was in theater and movie acting. She enjoyed acting in plays, but her dream was to be in the movies. She was lovely and already had some jobs as a model. I was smitten. I was majoring in behavioral psychology. We married after she graduated, and I continued my studies while she got roles in any play or movie she could find. She was always at rehearsal while I was at work and occasionally when I was home. Sometimes I was invited to her rehearsals, but those invitations stopped when she got the lead female role in one romantic comedy play. She came home later and was gone way more during this play than all the other ones. By this time, we were married for 3 years. I asked if I could go to one of these rehearsals, and she said these were private. I thought that was weird. She got free tickets for her family to come. When it was finally time for the performance, we all attended on the same night, her mother, father, sister, and me. She was a beautiful, convincing actress. The male lead in the play seemed to have great chemistry with her, but nothing convinced me so much as the passionate kiss at the end. I'd seen her kiss in other plays, but this one seemed different. I was convinced my worries were valid when she looked at him instead of me. After the show was over, her own father made a comment that fed into my worry. He said she could rip out any man's heart because it looked like she was in love with that man. We got to meet the cast, but my wife introduced us oddly to her male co-star. She introduced her mom and dad as her mom and dad. But then she only introduced her sister and I by our first names, like we could have been friends of hers or a couple. I told her my worries later that night after our celebratory dinner. She admitted she felt bonded to him, and they had a great time together. During all the preparation for the play, I asked her to stop talking to him completely. After closing night, she looked devastated and said if I'd reconsider, she planned to work with him again. It was because of the on-stage chemistry I was so uncomfortable with that she saw her career's potential to blossom with him as her co-star. I took this opportunity to ask her a few questions since she wanted me to reconsider. I asked if they ever hung out alone without my knowledge. She looked a little embarrassed but said yes. I asked why and she said it was to rehearse their lines and eat dinner. I asked if it was like a date and she said she didn't see it that way, but she wasn't sure what he thought. I asked if he knew I was her husband and she said she introduced me. I pointed out she only said my name and she looked confused, like she didn't remember doing that. Following the awkward silence, I told her I didn't want her to contact him or work with him again. She looked really upset and kind of angry. She said she didn't deserve to be controlled. I told her this wasn't something she could fight me on. It was a matter of keeping our marriage true and honest without anything that would make one of us uncomfortable. Well, she did eventually tell me she'd stop talking to him. But 1 month and many long absences later, I knew she could still be meeting up with him and doing things without my knowledge. One day, 5 or so months later, my wife and I were actually spending time together outside when she took an Instagram selfie without me. It showed the back of our house and location, which is part of the reason why AP jumped our fence. The other reason is that my wife had apparently stopped talking to him for a few days, and now he knew why. It was because he saw me and realized she was married. Of course, I recognized him from the play. My wife was freaking out and trying to say she hadn't seen him since the play. He didn't want to say anything when he realized she was betraying him. But I told him if he didn't want me to call the cops for his trespassing, He needed to be honest and tell me if they were having an affair. He said they were, but he hadn't heard from her. And now that he knew she was married, he wouldn't see her again. After he left, my wife told me not to believe him. She said he'd been trying to see her again ever since the play, but she refused without telling him why. So he lost it. Well, I'd have to be a fool if I didn't at least investigate what AP said. So I checked my wife's phone, and her dismay found her WhatsApp and made her lodging under threat of divorce. There were all the messages with AP. She only stopped talking to him for 3 days, but there was evidence she had intimate with him at his house several times after they went out together on dates. They were a full-blown couple since the play. I showed her family via screenshots sent from her phone before I smashed it. Then I kicked her out, and she begged me to give her a second chance. She said she realized now that it was just an infatuation and beyond their acting skills. They had nothing in common, and she didn't want to sleep with him or anyone else besides me ever again. I told her she might as well join the Coven of Nuns because she would never have me again. I trusted her, supported her, and wanted to build a great life with her. After I kicked her out, she tried countless times to break in. So I got a restraining order until our divorce was final. Then the house was officially mine. Today's second story. In this story, Opie discovers his wife has been secretly harboring her ex-boyfriend, leading to a confrontation and her eventual departure. Despite her pleas, trust is shattered and he takes primary custody of their children. The wife remains involved, but the damage is irreparable. He starts dating discreetly, shielding the children from further emotional strain. It's a tale of betrayal, forgiveness denied, and the painful aftermath of broken trust within a family torn by infidelity. Now let's get into the story. I knew something was up when our grocery budget increased enough to feed another person. I, 38, was the working partner while my wife, 35, was at home with her 2 kids. They were almost old enough for kindergarten, but until then, it made more sense for her to stay home with and give them their preschool education. It worked out well for us, and pretty often we had family game nights. Usually, hide and seek in the dark in times when my wife and I sat down to talk about things like all couples should. One night when I got home, my younger daughter asked if we could play hide and seek in the dark so that I could find the man in the house. I was really confused, but my wife laughed and said that was for Narnia. We decided to play some games that night. I totally forgot about my daughter's comment. About 1 week later, my wife and I sat down to review the budget. She spent way more on groceries once again, and when I asked her why, she didn't know what to say. Besides, she only got what we needed. I asked if this included toiletries, and she said yes, but the math just didn't add up. I gave her a new budget to stick to, but 1 month later, while we were talking again, she spent even more than the month before. I asked how much our kids eat, and she just laughed at me. I told her I was serious. We needed to survive off all the stuff we had in the pantry and stop spending so much money. Well, I didn't know it was the last time we would ever have a budget meeting again. It was the last time we did a lot of things. I got home from work a little early the next day, and I heard several footsteps upstairs. As I entered our bedroom, my wife shut the door of her closet fast and hard. She turned around and looked really scared. I asked what was going on and felt my heart rate escalating. She tried telling me nothing, but she wouldn't move away from the closet. I then moved her aside, and I whipped open the door. I turned on the light and was standing practically face to face with AP. I yanked him out and started yelling, asking who the hell he was and what he was doing there. My wife looked really freaked out when I found him. She could see her life ending before her eyes. I thought I recognized the scared man before me, but I couldn't remember how I knew him again. I demanded to know why he was in my wife's closet and who he was. He didn't want to say anything, but finally said his name was Josh. My little daughter piped up from the doorway and said he was Mommy's boyfriend. My jaw dropped and my wife said no, he was just Mommy's friend. But I remembered now he was my wife's ex from 4 years ago. What was I supposed to do? My daughters were witnessing all this. I grabbed the hair on the top of his head and drunk him out of the bathroom, but he said he'd leave willingly outside. I asked him if he slept with my wife. He looked embarrassed but said yes. I punched him in the face and he fell to the ground. He said he didn't have anywhere else to go, so she let him come in whenever I was gone and saved him from starving. I told him he could set up camp in an alligator swamp for all I cared, but he was never seeing my wife again. He walked off after the kids went asleep that night. I told my wife to leave immediately. She was upset but didn't look like she believed I would kick her out. She got naked and laid on the bed, telling me she just cared about his well-being. But they never had intimate, and now that I found out, the grocery budget would go back to normal. She said she realized now that she couldn't care for this man in my house with my money. She held him for a while and said she was glad things were over with. I told her I knew they had intimate. She instantly looked concerned but not ready to confess. She asked why I thought that. I said because AP could have lied, but he didn't. He told me the truth because I recognized him as her ex. Her face started turning white at this point. I told her I wasn't an idiot and I could see right through her. I knew she slept with him because she still had feelings for him and let him come into her house whenever I was gone and kept it all a secret for me. She started to cry and I knew I had her. She begged me to forgive her and swore she didn't expect any of this to happen. She just wanted to help someone in need. But she really only loved me and wanted to have our family for the rest of her life. I told her she made a very bad decision to keep him here and hidden from me. She put herself in a terrible situation. Her cheating was a likely and easy possibility. It was the hardest thing ever for us to tell the kids that mommy was moving out even though they would still see her plenty. And she was only moving to grandma's house. It was traumatizing. She lived with us then. She didn't. We didn't give the children the option to move because it was better. They primarily stayed with me. They didn't ask to go with their mom. They were just upset with her for letting in a man that wasn't daddy. This was her fault, and there wasn't any other way to look at it. My wife was sick with grief. She saw the kids a lot, and they even slept over at grandma's house a few times with mom. But it was hard. She asked me I don't know how many times to forgive her, but I couldn't. I didn't want or trust her anymore. Not as my wife or a worthy motherly example. I hope she could prove me wrong in the latter. So far she has. I started dating, but I don't let my kids know this. It would be a shame to involve them anymore in adult issues.